So we were just talking about how I throw my family under the bus unceremoniously during my podcast, and George is getting a kick out of it. So here we are for part two of why your clients are avoiding your meetings. And so the main focus of this one is to stop ragging on MSPs about why you guys cannot talk to people. And we're gonna start giving you tips and tricks on how to get them in your meetings, like how to get them to care about what you're saying. And I do have some bad news. It's going to be a journey. It's not a light switch. And just like I made a comment last time about how I started with the nonprofit, it took a couple sessions to really get them up and going and excited about the meetings, because the first one they came to, they're expecting the same old, and I switched the narrative. And they got to the end, they're like, "Whoa, that was intense, but that was so good." And then the next one they came prepared to. They're like, "Okay, Adam's running this meeting. It's going to be a ride." And then now it's like they come to these meetings, they know like bam, 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 this is what it's going to be, and everybody's going to talk, and we're going to discuss things. If you don't have much to say, you can bypass the meeting, but we still need your vote at the end. So, anyways, I want to hear from George. Can you give me a great tip? Like if you had to pick one thing out of your seasoned experience on how to have a better meeting with a client, what is one thing that people need to know?
I think the best thing you can do, outside of being prepared for any meeting you walk into, obviously, is to really understand the person you're going in to meet with or the group you're going in to meet with, what's important to them, right? What are their key initiatives? What's the most important to them, right? And can you connect with them on those issues, right? And really help provide them either relevant answers or stir questions that might cause them to think outside the box in their world, right? And get to your point earlier, in the first session we did together, how do you get that dialogue going? How do you get people talking, right? And how do you get it to the point where they look back at the hour or the 30 minutes or whatever they spent with you as the best hour they spent that day, right? And
Mm,
that they are looking forward to the next meeting. And I'm telling you, if you put it into their context and do what's important to them and drive their agenda, right, and forget about your own, you'll tend to have very successful meetings. Obviously, with the the assumption that what comes out of those meetings are actionable items that are important to your customer.
yes. Yeah. What do you want the outcome of this meeting to be? And if it's I want to sell this project, um, it's not going to happen, people. I have this trick that I do with interviews. Thank goodness I haven't had to interview for a job in a very long time. It's the curse of the entrepreneur. We'd make terrible employees. And my trick was always, before I walked into an interview, I spent a good 4 or 5 hours researching the company I was going to be interviewing with. And so God help the person who asked me, "So do you have any questions for us?" And when I start asking about a breakdown of your project schedule and the public announcement you made last year about this and this and this, and what was the reaction from the general public, when they start seeing that, they know that this is somebody who cares about the company. But then they got to be prepared to answer that question, because a lot of internal employees at companies don't research the company they're working for. I love finding the history of the company I'm working for. I love uncovering what it is that made this company where it is today. And I ask a lot of questions. And you've got to do the same thing for each and every one of your clients. And you got to find a way to track that stuff. And that's what Salesforce does for you if you're really good at that. There's a reason why in Salesforce they have those notes fields and those ways to track those things, because it's that important. The most primary thing, as George said, like it should be, do you know the person across the table from you? Oh yeah, they run a Microsoft shop, or oh yeah, they're a Mac shop with a Cisco switch. No, that's not them. Do they like the Packers? Are they a Celtics fan? Do they have a dog? Do they have a family? What's their business doing this year? These are general questions. I think Skip, if you go onto our site, we have a free tool called the 2Qs. And it's like, what are the biggest risks to your company and what are your biggest sources of revenue? We make it very simple. And so we align very well. Like my tip is the same as yours, George. Who's across the table from you? And, in Pitch It, like when I got into the Pitch It group, that one of the first things I did was I started researching these other companies. How'd they get in here? What are they bringing to the table? What's the portfolio look like? Oh, there's two other people that are doing similar things to me. Maybe I should connect with them and see how they're doing in their areas. Maybe there's some alignment here. Oh, that's a security company. That's really cool. I'd love to talk to them more. Oh, they're compliance. I used to be in compliance. And I went down the list. Oh, the cloud readiness. Oh my gosh, these guys are going to crush me because they've got an awesome product that I wish I had when I was working in corporate. you know, and it's like that scene from Pirates of Silicon Valley, like where Bill Gates is going, I want this when he first sees the mouse. I look at cloud readiness, I'm like, man, where was that when I was in the corporate office? Because that was a pain. And
No.
so, getting to know people and then becoming friends with them, because now you're seeing them as people who have value and have something to offer, and you have something to learn from them. Now I'm looking at George and Walter. I'm thinking, man, I got to learn from these guys on how MSPs work, how sales work from things, and watch what they're doing, what they have to say. Versus, I think a lot of people came into the group and they were so focused on how to make their own selves better that they forgot to say, well, how are other people doing it? Like you've got a couple years on me, George, which means that you have a lot of lessons that you can teach me. I could probably sit down with a couple pints and spend an hour just listening to days talking to you talk about lessons learned in the MSP world and still not have enough time to cover everything that you know. And as an engineer, you're walking to these meetings like, what can you learn from these people?
Well,
Is there anything that you have learned from a client, George?
Oh, a million things. I mean, not a day goes by that I don't learn a ton. You talk about the Pitch It, thing that we were on the journey together. I was an MSP for before they even called it MSP, right? But I can tell you, every single session, I learned 3 or 4 important things that I'm like, hey, and sometimes it was a reminder, right? Hey, I hadn't thought about that idea for a while. Maybe I better incorporate it into what I'm doing today because I kind of let it drop by the wayside. So to your point, any good meeting, which we had plenty of them within Pitch It, it was all about the dialogue, the importance, the relevance, the impact. I literally looked forward every week to jumping on those meetings, right? And learning new things, or at least being reminded that, hey, you don't know everything, George. You better listen. And, there's some good stuff going on here. You better use tomorrow.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and have a little come to Jesus session with people watching this on YouTube. How many of you have picked up on George's background? Looks like Boston Marathon, right? Am I correct? I
Yeah.
don't know what the middle one is. Almost looks like a stock floor. And then hockey. Is that one of your kids?
No, that's actually the Boston Bruins when they won the Stanley Cup too many years ago, unfortunately. But the last time they won the Stanley Cup, it's the picture of the goalie at that time lifting the cup over his head.
So you're a Bruins fan.
I am a Bruins fan.
Awesome. I just noticed the ribbon was next to it, and I'm like, is that a ribbon from that? And I'm like, does he have a kid that plays for the Bruins? But this is engagement here.
Yeah.
This is engagement. You did the Boston Marathon. I couldn't run a marathon. I am a 290 pound, 6'6" male. In my prime, I could not have run a 26 mile marathon, and I was an All-American athlete.
Yeah.
So the fact that you've done the Boston Marathon it's impressive. So, I could ask you, tell me about that. I could look at your background. I see a 1960 something in the background there. I'm like, what does that mean? These are things that I'm observing while George is talking. I should have brought him up for a session. I just saw the ribbons and I naturally started looking at them, got distracted. So if you listen to the first session again, you'll see me space off a couple times as I'm trying to figure out what these things are. So what's your picture in the middle there?
Basically, that's actually from the same Bruins game, and I happen to be at that game.
Oh, okay.
I was lucky enough, so took that away. But yeah, as you said, sort of some of my passions outside of work are, I love hockey, played it my whole life, and I took up marathoning. I had never run more than a mile contiguous before I was 42 years old, and
nice.
On a bet, somebody bet me I couldn't run a marathon, and I had to make them eat their words. So I I began a training regimen, started running, and then rattled off 15 marathons after the age of 42.
Oh man, fantastic! Congratulations. But you see how that works, people. Like, how easy is that? I just looked in the background. Now, in cybersecurity, we have a trick where we look at the background to find your password. But eventually you start looking and you realize that you care about this person. You see interesting things. Like, I don't follow hockey, but we have a semi-pro hockey. We're in Nebraska. Not much hockey here. We have a semi-pro team, the Stars, and that's what we have. And it's a lot of fun to go to those games. I don't run marathons. I got a friend of mine who's a professional marathon or a semi-professional marathon runner, but I understand how hard it is to do that. And there's an episode of How I Met Your Mother where Barney runs one on a bet and he can't stand up afterwards. He gets stuck on the subway. And there's ways to relate to your people across the table just by paying attention. And how many people of their technical background didn't even think to look behind George? You probably got this open in another tab. You're listening to the audio, or the majority of our listeners currently are on podcasts, so you're excused. But did you pick up on the Boston accent? Is he in Boston or is he from Boston? Where is he from? Like, these little things that you need to know. And that's how you make connections with people, is paying attention. And I've had to do this. It's hard for me to do this because I'm a bit of a narcissist here. Podcasts, I watch myself too much, and it's easy for me just to get on a roll. And so I have to pause and think and ask questions to get myself to understand. And then I start getting more and more curious the more I learn. It's like the trick I talked about in the first session of ask a question to make a meeting not boring. If you're not the presenter, ask a question. If you are the presenter, ask the question to the room that is relatable, not open-ended. Like, hey, what do you guys know about firewalls? You're going to get dead silence. You might get somebody who's real go-getter, who's absolutely bored out of their mind, and go, isn't that the thing that protects us from the internet? You might get that. But if you ask them like, hey, tell me about the Bruins. How are they doing this year? Now you have their attention.
Yeah.
Take that, write a note about it. Maybe look up and learn a bit about the Bruins. If this customer is worth $10,000 a month to you, is it worth spending an hour learning about the Bruins? What are they doing? When was the last time they won? How's the season going? And then being able to walk into the next meeting knowing that now you have this commonality. Yeah. Hey, maybe next time you land a big project, buy some tickets. I don't even watch hockey, but I gotta say, I love getting box tickets. I love box tickets. When I would go to Denver, we would get box tickets to hockey games, and I didn't know much about what was going on, but man, the food was good. It was nice being up there, being treated well. And I can only imagine how much more that would be to a fan. So my second tip for people in a meeting is, do you know this person well enough to buy them a gift? Not a gift card, an actual gift. Because it's so easy to cheat and buy a Starbucks gift card and hand it to them. Because you know what? Generally, people like coffee. You're in an office setting, you need the coffee to stay awake because the meetings are boring. But can you walk into this meeting like, hey, I know, I've got a retired jersey that a friend of mine had from a Bruins player. I bet you George would love that. Okay, cool. It's signed, by the whole team. It still has the sweat on it from the cup. These things are great. So you spend $1,000 on this really cool gift for George to hang on his wall in there. He is bonded to you forever. And that's a connection. Versus you walk in and give him $1,000 gift card to Starbucks that he can take out with his family about 1 million times. The two gifts have a different meaning. One required foreknowledge, one required money. And that's a test I have for, do you know your client? Do you know what's important to them? Do you know where they're trying to go this year? And I can say firsthand that I transition clients when I talk to them from $1,500 a month to $9,000 a month because I provided them solutions that grew what they cared about, whether it was more students in the building, teachers who had a better work-life balance, employees who now didn't have to spend an hour a day filling out timesheets. All these things resulted in massive products and productivity. And the thing is, your employees are going to love it because now they're doing something that matters. I did this thing for this client. Their life is better because of what I'm doing. So, so George, you don't run an MSP anymore, right?
No. It's been several years since my last MSP that I was directly involved in. I've created a few SaaS companies, Cloud Readiness being one of them. But my customers are MSPs.
Man, my customers were MSPs too, and they're fickle. I often tell people like, hey, if you guys were all the same, my job would be so much easier. Because people are like, well, can you do this in your software? Or like, well, I could, but you'd be the only one. Why? You seem to be the only one who cares about how many pickles people have. Like whatever it is. It's always something like that's a good idea, but you realize that you're the only one who tracks that, right? It's your value prop. Start telling clients we track pickles. Whatever it is that you do, because I don't do it in my software. And as a SaaS, you don't want to develop a piece of software for one client unless they're going to give you an exorbitant amount of money. Even then, you're like, okay, does this hook into my module? Now I'm going to have to support this. I'm going to have to figure out how to get my SOC audit up to date with this particular module and what's going on. But I'm listening to my client. I'm saying, hey, what are you doing? Sometimes you have to tell your client, no, stop caring about that. And that's what we're doing here today is in your meetings, stop caring about technology, start caring about solutions. When we say solutions, we're not saying better firewalls or better switches or better PCs or the latest and greatest VR headset. We're talking about, hey, we know that you are a trucking company and you've been manually entering your mileage for the past 40 years. What if we could save that time? What if we give you a 100% accurate result on your mileage via software platform, and it'll help you increase your tax write-offs every year? Automatically plug into QuickBooks and you're ready to go. And they go, man, that'd be great. Does that exist? Well, actually it does. And we just got done implementing it for another client. Would you like us to quote that out for you guys? Would we ever? And now you've got a great product. And just so happens there's a firewall that needs to be installed to make that product work, because you're going to have more activity going across your VPN. Fantastic. Your client doesn't care about the firewall. They care about the fact that you solved this mileage problem for them. Or you got a school that wants to do a Chromebook program. They want a 1-to-1 child to PC ratio. You learn this about them. You say, hey, in order to get here, which will allow you to have more students and which will make your teacher stop pulling their hair out, here's what we need to do. It's going to cost about $30,000 up front, and then it's going to be this much a month afterwards. The school could say, okay, well, we can find a donor to solve this problem because it's going to grow the school. So that is how you relate to a customer. Do you have any great relational stories here to finish us up? We got about 2 minutes left before I've got to close down the podcast.
Yeah, I think, and you've hit upon a lot of it, Adam. And it is all about being curious, truly being interested in the success of your clientele, know what's important to them, right? In other words, a great question. What are your top 3 to 5 corporate objectives this year, right? And then I, as the MSP, how do I link into them? How do I help them achieve those goals, right? How do I perhaps give some ideas they hadn't thought about that would make their life a lot better and more, at the end of the day, it's all about impact, relevance, and value, right? And making sure that client spends the best hour of their life with you during whatever meeting you have with them.
Yeah. You get in a meeting with George or I, you may not get the most technology discussions done, but you will be entertained for a good solid hour. And you'll walk out feeling valued. And, if you like that terminology, if you like that mindset, imagine somebody who has this mindset, who actually cares about who's across the table. Imagine what they're doing with their company. So George went from an MSP and now is running a great software company called Cloud Readiness. imagine like what that product looks like, that person with that mindset has, where they care genuinely about who's across the table. What kind of product would they make? And then you look at a place like Cloud Readiness, and I look at their website, and there's people on the front. There's motion, there's talk, and it's immediately relatable. And you want to be that way with your clients. So thank you, George, for coming on. This has been a great conversation. I'm always about better meetings because that's what we focus on at Humanize IT, is humanizing the conversations with your clients. It looks like you guys do the same thing, is putting that client first, making things easier for them so they can make better decisions in the long run and feel valued. So thank you, George, for coming on. Let's have you on again sometime.
Hey, thanks, man. Adam, that was great. And good luck at IT Nation.
Thank you.